Now, diplomats from the European Union say the bloc is ready to hit the United States with retaliatory tariffs if Donald Trump follows through on his threats to punish countries that oppose a US takeover of Greenland. European leaders are now trying to persuade the US president to abandon the idea. Posting on social media on Sunday, President Trump claimed Denmark had not done enough to counter the Russian threat to Greenland, adding, "Now it is time and it will be done." Well, Germany's Chancellor has made clear that Europe still has some cards to play. Friedrich Merz said the EU would prefer to avoid confrontation, but insisted that it is prepared to defend its interests.
The American government knows that we could respond from our side. I do not want that, but if necessary, we will also protect our European interests, including our German national interests. We do not want this escalation. We do not want a trade dispute with the United States of America. But if we are confronted with such tariffs, which we consider inappropriate, then we are in a position to respond. And that is exactly what we will discuss in Brussels on Thursday.
Well, calls for retaliation are growing louder, and this time that retaliation may not stop at counter-tariffs. French President Emmanuel Macron has floated the idea of the use of a powerful emergency tool, ominously dubbed the trade bazooka.
It's these images that have sparked US President Donald Trump's anger. Troops from 8 European countries deployed to support Greenland. Trump is now threatening new tariffs against all of those countries, including Germany, the UK and France, starting February 1st. Aides to French President Emmanuel Macron say he will push the EU to activate the so-called trade bazooka, the first time in EU history such a measure would be used. Officially called the anti-coercion instrument, it's considered the EU's most powerful weapon in trade disputes. The measures could block American products from entering the European market, meaning it could shut off American enterprises from its single market consisting of 450 million consumers. US companies could also be excluded from public contracts. Additional levies on US software firms are also possible. At a press conference in Brussels, an EU spokesperson did not exclude the use of the bazooka.
Should the threatened tariffs be imposed, the European Union has tools at its disposal and is prepared to respond, because we will do everything necessary to protect EU economic interests.
It seems after favouring a policy of de-escalation, the EU is switching tone. So what's next? The European Commission can propose activating the instrument, but it would still need approval from a qualified majority of EU states. Under the rules, it could take months before any concrete measures come into force. But even launching the process could send a signal that Brussels is ready to push back against its closest ally.
So let's talk about possible European responses with Marion Messmer, who's director of the International Security Programme at Chatham House. Welcome to DW. The EU is not a military actor, so in practical terms, how does the bloc apply meaningful pressure to the US if diplomacy fails again?
That's a really good question. And the main instrument that the EU has, of course, that's not military, is economic. And I really wouldn't underestimate that, given the size of the EU economy and given the fact that the EU was already ready to apply various reactive measures to the US when President Trump first announced tariffs about 6 months ago. So I think the other element that's really interesting here is how EU leaders are coordinating. And of course, most EU member states are also NATO member states. So we've got a really interesting mix of options on the table where European states can, on the one hand, of course, hit back economically if necessary through the EU, but also have military options available through NATO. And I think something that's new that we are seeing increasingly this year, and I would wager beyond, is essentially that European leaders are able to access these different tools, whether they're economic, whether they're military, and they're really thinking through their options, how they can respond together and individually to threats from President Trump.
So, as is the EU's want, they've all gone off for a meeting to discuss options. Are we there yet? Are we yet at a position where the EU is ready to say, that's it, you've gone too far?
Well, I think we're seeing that kind of action from various states, right? So we've seen Nordic politicians meet together and try to figure out what a Nordic option could be. France and Germany have already made clear that they are cooperating and coordinating their position. There have been various EU statements. And I think while this can sometimes be seen as a weakness of the European Union, I think in this case it is actually a strength, because you're seeing various European voices saying, actually, we are figuring out together what can be done, and there will be a robust response. And you're essentially hearing this from several decision-making centers, whether that is the Nordics, whether that's a more traditional duo like France and Germany, whether that's Italy, where the Italian government has been very close to the Trump administration. So you're really seeing that the European Union can have one voice, but actually also is made up of lots of states, all of which are important to the US, or at least traditionally have had strong relationships with the US. So I don't think there will be necessarily a single EU response as such. I mean, if we get to the point of retaliatory tariffs or a restriction to the single market, then of course that would be a single EU response. But I think we are going to see essentially a tailored response where different groupings of states are going to take complementary but slightly different action. That sort of shows how close they are with Greenland.
That's really interesting that you put it that way, because of course what Trump has done is he's applied the pressure, he's applied these sanctions to 7 EU states plus the UK. So not to everyone, apparently trying to sort of drive this wedge between them. Do you therefore expect the other EU states who are not in this fight, do you expect them to sort of just quietly stand back and let the Magnificent Seven get on with it?
Well, that's not really what we've seen so far. So the 7 states that Trump threatened explicitly were the states that essentially put together a joint statement and said that they were ready to deploy military to Greenland, essentially in response to Trump's original threat that the US would take Greenland by military force if necessary. And so what we're seeing here is some of the states that have some of the strongest militaries in Europe. And then, of course, it also includes the UK as a non-EU member state. But at the same time, we've also seen other states essentially speak up to this additional threat. So you've now got various European states all saying this matters to us, whether we originally committed troops to Greenland or not. And so I think a response is also going to be very layered. And then I think the other bit that really matters here is that we have already heard from France and Germany that they have said together that if there is further economic damage done to European Union member states, then there needs to be a joint response. And President Macron especially has wanted to take a look at the EU anti-coercion tool and has essentially requested the Commission to think about whether that could be used in this instance. Just
tell us briefly what the anti-coercion tool is.
So the anti-coercion tool is a relatively new tool that the EU has available now. It was originally developed to be used potentially against China, but it hasn't been used since. And it essentially would allow the Commission to investigate any allegations of economic coercion. And if the Commission finds that economic coercion is taking place, then the EU can act without requiring consensus of all EU member states. So it gives the Commission a little more teeth to respond to any risk of economic coercion.
Have you run the sums on this? Is it worth the EU standing up to the US, whether it be in terms of economically or in terms of security? Is Greenland worth losing all that for?
Well, I think it's not about sums in that sense, right? Because the challenge, especially when you deal with someone like President Trump, really seems to be that if you can't stop him in his tracks, then there's no saying what the next request is going to be. So if Denmark gave in on Greenland, then what does he want next? You know, is he coming for the Faroe Islands or for a similar exposed territory? And I think this is really what this is about. I mean, we've had this challenge increasingly ever since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that some states seem to think that international law doesn't apply to them, or that the size of their military is more important than a smaller state's territorial sovereignty. And so I think for Europe, this is a really important moment where they can essentially stand with the people of Greenland and say that they don't want to be a part of the United States, and it's not up to the US president to decide that he just wants Greenland.
A quick word then on how you think this will end.
That's a great question. I mean, I really hope that there's a way to end it diplomatically. When President Trump previously threatened tariffs last year, there was a way to negotiate down from this. What worries me a bit is that we've seen so many reiterated threats against Greenland over a period of over 2 weeks now. So that means that this has become a really entrenched issue in the United States, which makes it that much harder for President Trump to step back. But we know that this is really unpopular in the United States. It's not something that Americans want to see happen. And it is, of course, incredibly dangerous for European states. So hopefully there will be some sort of a way to come to a negotiated solution that doesn't see us come to economic clash or even worse, to war, because if it came to that, then we really wouldn't know what that means for the future of European security.
Thank you so much. Marion Messmer of the International Security Programme at Chatham House.
Thanks.
All right, let's go through this with our political correspondent, Simon Young. Welcome, Simon. Tell us about the balance that Germany is trying to strike.
Yeah, Phil, well, Germany definitely doesn't want an escalation of these tariff tensions with the United States. Trump has already imposed 15% tariffs on EU exports to the US. And, of course, Germany's economy is very much export-oriented, so another 10% on top of that, which is what Trump is threatening those countries that oppose his ambition to own Greenland. That would be a big blow for German business. Another key aspect of this is the threat to NATO, a real confrontation with the United States. Even if it's only a trade confrontation, I think would have serious implications for the North Atlantic Alliance. At the same time, you've got many Germans looking at this and looking at these threats from Donald Trump and saying enough is enough. We can't be pushed around by this bullying. We can't kowtow to this man who, even if the United States is our most important foreign ally. So that's the balance that the government is trying to strike. On the one hand, rhetorically pushing back, saying that Trump can't get control of Greenland in the way that he's saying that he wants to, but at the same time trying not to sort of square up to him so much that it makes these tariffs inevitable, perhaps.
And so what if the talking, the diplomacy, the negotiations don't work? What will Germany do then?
Well, Chancellor Merz hasn't said this yet. He said that, of course, in the end, we would have to defend German and European interests and push back. And in the past, he's always sought to sort of charm Trump and get along with him rather than go down the confrontational route. We have heard, for instance, from France, President Macron saying he's going to activate a law to sort of respond with countermeasures when there's economic coercion, sort of setting out the weapons that he might use. That's a more confrontational approach, and some of the other European countries seem to be making the same kind of noises. Here in Germany, I think they want to find a way to smooth the waters and cool all this down. That's why there's a lot of focus on the meeting planned later this week between European leaders and Donald Trump when he comes to Davos in Switzerland, if indeed he does come to that meeting.
Thanks, Simon. DW political correspondent Simon Young.
Well, for more on this, I'm joined now by Pascal, Confavreux, deputy spokesperson at the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Paris. Welcome to DW. Mr. Confavreux, how far would France go to protect Greenland from being taken by the US?
I think from the very beginning, when we had this threat of tariffs in the beginning of the weekend, our response was very clear, was to coordinate with European partners, and was to also say that we are all strong together, the Europeans. We have many tools. Among them, there is the tariffs that you were mentioning. Among them, there is the anti-coercion tool as well. What is important is to go all together, and that's exactly what we've done. We took the initiative this weekend to do so with the Commission, with our member states, with the 7 and 8 members that were specifically targeted by the American president. So that's where we are now.
EU leaders are due to hold an emergency summit on Thursday, as you know, to formulate a joint response to the U.S. over Greenland. France will be playing an important role there. What do you expect to be decided?
I will leave the leaders to decide, but there are many possibilities. One is really to show our strengths, to show our unity, because these threats must stop, because Denmark and Greenland are members of the EU, and so we have to show first solidarity, but we have to show that there is no attack on European sovereignty with no cost. So it's we have to show this unity, and that's exactly what's happening now.
So far, Europeans have tried to flatter Donald Trump in order to keep him on board in the Ukraine war and secure NATO. Should we now expect a hard change of course, given what's happened, given the threats that are on the table?
We don't want any escalatory measures. We just want to state that we do have a sovereignty, a European sovereignty, and that this must stop. The Greenland belongs to Greenlanders, and that's where we stand. Are there threats in Arctic and Greenland? Yes, it's a place where you have a rivalry of powers. Do we have to be more present there? Yes, there is indeed at present an exercise, a military exercise organized by Denmark, as we did last year, actually. And so we're taking part in it this year as well, to show that we take very seriously the security of Greenland and Arctic more generally.
How do you explain Donald Trump's insistence on owning Greenland? As you mentioned, there are already international forces there. The U.S., NATO forces there. The U.S. already has a military presence, which Denmark agrees can be expanded on Greenland. Can this really be about America's national security, as President Trump says?
As you're saying, Denmark is an ally of the United States within NATO. It's a perfect ally. They are members of NATO since a very long time as well. And they do have a bilateral agreement, military agreement, since the 1950s, which gives already access to the United States military presence there. So, and they do have exchanges on this to see what can be done on that track. So. I'm not here to comment what the President of the United States thinks. I'm here to say what we think we should answer. And as we were saying that there should be no aggression or attack by force in Ukraine, we say that for another European territory, Greenland, but this threat of force should not prosper.
We're witnessing a flurry of diplomacy on this topic right now. This all coincides, of course, with the start of the World Economic Forum in Davos. Donald Trump is supposed to be there, as will many European leaders. Do you expect an opportunity in Davos to diffuse this crisis, maybe behind closed doors?
Diplomacy is always better. What we need to know in our diplomacy is our own strengths as European. We sometimes have the tendency to minimize that. We do have, since 2023, we do have this anti-coercion instrument, which is a deterrence instrument, which is a kind of instrument you don't want to use. It's a kind of last resort instrument because it can raise tariffs, it can block the access to public tenders, it can block the access to the European market for certain foreign companies or for foreign investment in Europe. So it's a very powerful tool. We need to know how strong we are. It's exactly the kind of common move that we have done in the last years, actually, with Germany, with France, with all the members of the with the European Union. Diplomacy is always, of course, to be preferred. So I cannot say exactly what will happen in Davos. I can say that our ambassadors in Brussels have met already yesterday, that we are, the President Emmanuel Macron, the Minister Jean-Noël Barrot, are in contact with all their counterparts in the European Union as we speak, and to foster and to see how our common response can be.
Pascal Confavreux, Deputy Spokesperson at the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Paris, thank you very much for speaking with us today.
Thank you.